February 4th, 1974. It was around 9 o'clock at night when someone knocked on the door of in Berkeley, California. Inside was 19-year-old Patricia Campbell Hearst. She was a college student. Her fiancé, Stephen Weed, was with her. The people at the door weren't there to talk. Several armed members of the Symbionese Liberation Army forced their way inside. Weed was beaten. Patty was grabbed, taken from the apartment, and put into the trunk of a car. Then they drove away. The kidnapping itself was shocking. But there was a reason the SLA had chosen her. Patty Hearst wasn't just another college student. She was the granddaughter of William Randolph Hearst, the newspaper magnate whose publishing empire had made the Hearst name one of the most recognizable in America. The SLA understood exactly what they were doing. They hadn't kidnapped someone politically powerful. They had kidnapped someone whose name was powerful, and within hours, the entire country knew she was missing. The FBI would later describe the kidnapping as the beginning of one of the strangest cases in its history. But nobody yet knew just how strange it was going to become. The people who took her. The Symbionese Liberation Army was a small revolutionary organization operating in California. Its members believed the American political and economic system needed to be destroyed and replaced. They weren't simply protesters. They were armed. Before Patty Hearst was kidnapped, SLA members had already been involved in violent attacks, including the killing of Oakland School Superintendent Marcus Foster. The organization was led by Donald DeFries, who called himself Field Marshal Cinque. The group was small, but it understood publicity, and Patty Hearst gave them exactly what they wanted. After the kidnapping, the SLA began releasing recordings and demands. They wanted food distributed to poor communities in exchange for Patty's release. The Hearst family agreed to a massive food distribution effort, but Patty wasn't released. Instead, something much harder to explain was happening inside her captivity. For weeks, Patty's family had no idea what was happening to her. Then came a recording. It was Patty's voice. But the message shocked them. She wasn't simply asking her family to save her. She was criticizing them. Then, on April 3rd, another recording was released. This time, Patty said she had joined the SLA. She had even chosen a new name, Tania. Her family immediately argued that she had been brainwashed. The SLA presented something completely different. Patty Hearst, wealthy heiress, had supposedly rejected her old life and joined their revolution. The timing mattered. She had been kidnapped only 59 days earlier, and 12 days after that recording, the country would get its first visual evidence of what Tania actually meant. 1974. Hibernia Bank in San Francisco. A bank employee switched on a security camera. The camera captured several armed people entering the bank. One of them was Patty Hearst. She was carrying an assault rifle. The robbery took about 10 minutes. The SLA escaped with roughly $10,000, and Patty Hearst was suddenly no longer just a missing person. There was now photographic evidence of her participating in an armed robbery. The images became some of the most famous photographs of the entire case. Patty, wearing a beret and carrying a rifle. The granddaughter of one of America's richest newspaper publishers, standing inside a bank with an armed revolutionary group. Because the central question was still unanswered. Was Patty Hearst participating because she wanted to, or because she believed refusing could get her killed? That question would eventually become the heart of her criminal trial. The FBI had been searching for Patty and the other SLA members. On May 17th, police surrounded an SLA hideout. Inside were several members of the organization. A gun battle followed. Then the building caught fire. 6 SLA members died. Donald DeFries was among them. The confrontation was broadcast on television. Patty Hearst wasn't inside the house. She and several other SLA members had escaped. And now, something strange happened. The organization had been badly damaged, but Patty didn't return home. Instead, she stayed underground. She was still traveling with members of the SLA. Still using the name Tania. Still wanted by the FBI. The young woman who had once lived a relatively ordinary life was now part of an underground fugitive network. In April 1975, members of the SLA robbed the Crocker National Bank in Carmichael, California. During the robbery, a customer named Myrna Upsal was shot and killed. Patty was involved with the group at the time and later acknowledged involvement in the events surrounding the robbery, including serving as a getaway driver. But she was not the person who fired the fatal shot. That distinction would matter later. September 18th, 1975. The FBI finally caught up with Patty Hearst in San Francisco. It had been 19 months since she was taken from her apartment. She was arrested alongside Bill Heiress, Emily Heiress, and Wendy Yoshimura. To some people, it proved she had genuinely joined the SLA. To others, it demonstrated how completely the organization had altered her identity. The trial would have to decide which interpretation carried more weight. The Patty Hearst trial began in 1976. Her defense team included the famous attorney F. Lee Bailey. The defense wasn't denying that Patty had been inside the bank. The photographs made that impossible. Instead, they attacked the question behind the photograph. What choice did she actually have? Her lawyers argued that Patty had been subjected to extreme coercion and psychological pressure after her kidnapping. The prosecution had a very different argument. They pointed to her conduct. She had publicly declared allegiance to the SLA. She had participated in the Hibernia robbery. She had remained with the group for months after the Los Angeles shootout, and she had continued participating in the underground life of the organization. The prosecution's position was essentially that whatever had happened during the first weeks of captivity, it did not excuse everything she did afterward. On March 11, 1976, Patty Hearst was found guilty of armed bank robbery. She received a 7-year prison sentence. Patty Hearst went to prison. The conviction remained a fact. So did the kidnapping. But the evidence didn't fit perfectly into either story, and that is why the case remained controversial long after the courtroom ended. Patty did not serve the full 7 years. President Jimmy Carter commuted her sentence in 1979. She had served roughly 22 months. The commutation ended her federal prison sentence, but it did not erase the conviction. That distinction is important. A commutation reduces or ends a sentence. It doesn't mean the conviction never happened. After prison, Patty Hearst eventually returned to private life. She married Bernard Shaw in 1979. She later became involved in charitable work and public appearances. And perhaps that's because the case doesn't have the ending people usually want. There is no final piece of evidence that allows everyone to agree on exactly what happened inside Patty Hearst's mind. The law made its decision. History kept asking questions.